So in the last 2.5 years alone, my own Shopify store, which I have right here on my screen, has done a little over $2.4 million in sales. Now, I know that there were about $500,000 in returns. There were a lot of reasons as to why these returns happened. Number one reason was because a lot of these products were $500, $1,000 and more AOV products, because again, during the middle portion of when I was running this e-commerce brand, I did decide to kind of maneuver my store more into the higher ticket niches, and that is the reason why a lot of the returns kind of added up, because the overall AOVs were so high just to begin with. Number two reason was because of what was going on in the world in 2020, a lot of issues with suppliers, a lot of issue with fulfillment, and all of that stuff just kind of ended up adding up to this overall return number. But nonetheless, this Shopify store did end up doing $2.4 million since about November, which is when it really started getting those sales. But exactly how was I able to do it? What was my strategy? And where is the store going as of right now? I highly recommend that this is one video you watch until the end, just because there's a lot of stuff that I need to cover, which is basically done through experience. Now, before we actually get into the actual details of what my profit was, what the ad spend was, etc., because I'm sure you're very excited about that, let's learn a little bit more about this e-commerce brand. Number one thing was, this e-commerce brand was actually a dropshipping store. Now, prior to me actually starting this e-commerce brand, I had another fashion-based e-commerce brand which was solely getting run on Facebook ads, and you guys already know the drill with Facebook. A lot of suspensions started to happen during 2019. Unfortunately, that account did end up getting suspended on Facebook ads, meaning that specific Facebook page and the associated ad account. So as a result, I really had no other way to kind of divert and pivot my business besides just starting fresh, because that's really what I wanted to do. I did not really want to sell fashion-based stuff all my life. So that's exactly what I did. Now, during that time period, there were not a lot of Google Ads related YouTube tutorials out there, or just anything about Google to begin with. So to kind of play it safe, I decided to go with a general store, because again, I didn't know how to do proper niche research or product research or any of those things during that time period. But this brings us to now. Overall, this store has only spent about $382,000, as you can see, to be specific, $382,220.66 for a total ROAS of 4.45. Now, during a lot of the early portion of this time period, the ROAS numbers are actually not correct. It's actually a much higher ROAS, because as you know, I already did about $2.4 million, and 95% of the sales are from Google Ads. So again, that's one reason why the ROAS only says 4.45. It was much higher. Now, when it comes to the actual strategy, exactly what I tried with this brand, there were way too many strategies I tried right from the beginning, and I have a bunch of different campaigns to kind of go with all of the strategies I tried. So scrolling all the way down, we can see that there were about 278 different campaigns I launched on this ad account. A lot of this was testing campaigns, scaling campaigns, all of the general stuff. And we're gonna talk more about the exact strategies as to what is personally what I believe working right now and what I tried overall. But just to kind of keep it very broad, it's just exactly what I teach on my YouTube channel. I tried a lot of smart shopping campaigns, a lot of standard shopping campaigns, a few search campaigns here and there for winning products. And every step of the way, there are 3 different phases, which I'll be covering very shortly, when it comes to running an e-commerce brand with Google Ads. But within every phase, there was something different that worked. For instance, right in the beginning, if we go back all the way to 2019 when I started this store, and we kind of change this time period up as well. So 2019, and let's just change this to 12/31 to kind of look at that time period to see exactly what was working. We can see what kind of campaigns I had running. So there were not too many campaigns running, only these specific ones right here. And overall, as you can see, the ROAS was very, very bad. Now, unfortunately, this ROAS is correct. I was actually losing money during the early start portion of my e-commerce brand, and that's because again, there were no YouTube tutorials out there. There was no kinds of Google Ads courses out there, and even if there were, I was too cheap at that time because I didn't have too much money left after getting suspended for my other fashion brand to spend on them. And that's one thing a lot of people actually don't take advantage of. I have a Google Ads course which a lot of people have already found a lot of success with. I also handle Google Ads for you directly if you're doing $30,000 or more under my Google Ads agency, Your Marketing. But just to keep it general, there's a lot of resources out there for you right now, which weren't unfortunately out there for me when I started, hence why I was in a total loss running this e-commerce brand. I mean, these first general testing campaigns right here were all running on manual CPC, and this is where I really started to kind of hate manual CPC and not want to use it at all because of my initial experience with it. It just never really worked for me besides for those scaling campaigns. But move along then to the later portion of 2020, which is when I started to achieve that massive levels of success. So from January 1st to May 31st, if we look at exactly what was starting to happen, we can see how things started to go about. So May 31st, again, we can see during this time period, I had spent about $57,000 and I had made back almost $500,000 just within the first portion of 2020. You can see some of these campaigns at the very top running, providing amazing results. This was a 6.96x ROAS. This was almost a 20x ROAS, one of my best selling products to date. And I covered this product exactly what it is on my Twitter. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Ecommerce Shri. You can see I've done this to a lot of product related stuff, strategy related stuff I do post on Twitter. But amazing product during that time period. I was just starting to figure out exactly what was working, what was not working, where my account was responding to the best, and I was doubling down on it. This again means that some of these campaigns were actually smart shopping campaigns, like this one right here, this one right here. Some of them were still standard shopping campaigns because during that time period, what worked the best was of course standard shopping. So I was kind of taking advantage of both during that time period. But here's the kind of weird thing about this. A lot of my success didn't actually come from these campaigns. It came from these other things which we're gonna cover right now. And to put it in the order of importance and exactly how we're gonna cover it, number one thing was the website, number two thing was the back end, number three, products, and number four, of course, the ads themselves. Let's start off with the website itself, because to be honest with you, number one focus at all times to scale my Shopify store with Google Ads was the website itself. A lot of people actually get it wrong, but you want to keep things very simple. During that time period, what I was doing was I didn't really have a clue as to what a good conversion rate optimized website looked like for Google Ads, because again, all the experience I really had was just from Facebook ads. So what I did during that time period was I looked at a lot of my competitors who were selling similar products. So for instance, if we go onto Google and if we type in the word 3D printer, and to kind of mimic what I used to do during that time period, I used to look at the first top 1 to top 3 competitors coming up, of course, excluding Amazon, and I looked at their landing pages. I kind of understood why their landing page was standing out of the crowd. So for example, if I was selling 3D printer at that time, I would kind of come over here to this website, see exactly how the layout is. Now, as you can see, clearly this layout is very, very different from a normal dropshipping store or normal Shopify store in general. And that is exactly what kind of started me into making these custom designed landing pages. Now, when I say custom design, I was not using landing page builders. I was just using custom themes. But what you can really do, even if you don't use a custom theme, if you use a free theme, is try to figure out a way to stand your product out of the crowd. And this website does it well because their description is right here on the left, and their add to cart button, buy button, all of this important information is right next to the description on the right side. Moving on to this specific store, which was number 2 on Google Shopping listings, very similar layout to what we normally see with any Shopify store. You just have the title at the top, followed by the pricing, followed by just variations, and then add to cart and the description. This is clearly a general Shopify store. So looking at both of these, you can get a lot of different ideas as to how you should be kind of laying out your website, because again, this is the number 1 listing that was on shopping. This is the number 2 listing that was on shopping. Obviously, they're doing something right. People are interacting with not only their ads that are coming up here, but also purchasing from them, because again, Google detects all of these things, hence why it is in the front constantly. So that's pretty much all I did during the early time periods, because again, I did not have any cool strategies of my own to try with the landing page themselves. But one major problem I see now with a lot of my e-commerce clients, which I currently handle Google Ads for under my Google Ads agency, which again, if you're doing $30,000 or more in sales, you need some extra help scaling your brand to the next level with Google Ads, go on to my website at yourmarketing.com and book a free call with me to see exactly how we can work together to make that happen. But one of the most common issues that I see is not only are their landing pages extremely unoptimized, but overall their website speed is very, very bad. Just last week, I had a very deep and serious talk with one of my e-commerce clients who had a loading times page speed of 11 seconds. Yes, you heard that right, 11 seconds. Unfortunately, that's just not gonna cut it with Google Ads. And then people come to me and wonder why they're not getting sales or results of any kind with Google Ads, or if they are, why they're not profitable. All of these things, especially on the landing page, matter significantly. And these websites right here are doing these things correctly. I mean, for example, if we take a look at PageSpeed, a website dev website, and look at the #1 website which we saw in Google Shopping and look at their speed, we can see that even this website doesn't have too great of a overall landing page experience, but they're still #1. So that means if somebody were to improve their website even further, even more than this right here, have it very fast, loading very quickly, smoothly, Google is going to detect that, and it's going to think that because more people are coming on to your website and you have a lower bounce rate, you're providing something of value to the customer. When that is happening, when Google is seeing that, what happens is Google starts increasing your quality score, and as a result, you start paying less and less for your cost per link clicks and all sorts of those important stats, which again impacts your ROAS and impacts your cost per conversions very, very profitably. So this is exactly what I kind of understood later during that early portion when I started this e-commerce brand, and as a result, I started fully going heavily on fixing these small issues. Now, that was not really the only thing that I was fixing, because if we go back to this #1 brand right here, we can see that they have some custom things going on their website. For example, this trust badge right here, very custom. I have not really seen this on Google Images. Now, is it really professional? You can kind of go either way and kind of decide if you think this is professional or not, but nonetheless, it is unique. It is different from what everybody else is doing, and that is exactly what Google wants, because that is what their customers want. When somebody sees this compared to just a normal trust badge you see on Google Images, they're more likely to kind of trust this compared to something else. But along with their trust badge, one thing I really liked what this website did is that they had a completely different image, this one as well as this one slightly, than what their competitors were doing. I mean, if you look at this specific product right here, it is not really what we are seeing right here. I mean, there might be some similar styles, but overall this color is very unique, and hence why more people are most likely interacting with it. Why? Because it really stands out of the crowd compared to the rest. And same thing here. Now this image, it's a little bit more on the more distant side, meaning you have to kind of take a closer look to see exactly what this product is, but nonetheless, this color of the product is white. The image makes it look very different than the rest, and that is really what is working for these two brands right here. Exactly what I was doing to get this e-commerce brand of mine to $2.4 million, by the way. All I really cared about is the image. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other important things you should be focusing on as well. #1 thing is also pricing, because without proper pricing, it's really not gonna work. But #2, also the description. So in the order of importance, I would first recommend you focus on image, because this is literally what I was doing, and this is the same thing which helped me do $2.4 million in sales at over a 5x ROAS profitably with Google Ads mostly. And again, image #2, pricing #3, description. Description is really the last, because if you have your pricing and if you have your image correct and also your title is very relevant, you already win about 80 to 90% of the battle. Then the rest just comes from having a good description. But really, when it comes to the product page, that was mostly what I was focusing on. But we don't kind of end there. But before we continue further, one thing I want to mention is with the title itself. As I mentioned earlier, having a good, properly search engine optimized title is extremely important. But nowadays, I'm aware a lot of YouTubers who I don't really want to name are suggesting the keyword stuffing strategy. The keyword stuffing strategy is, for example, something like this. So if we go back to Google right here and we search up 3D printer, and let's say another keyword that you found which was good was best 3D printer. So you type in best 3D printer, and another keyword you found was maybe something like a Pro 3D printer, and you also found the keyword dual 3D printer, and you saw that this was good, getting you sales, all of that good stuff. What a lot of so-called YouTubers and Google Ads gurus are suggesting is that you use this as your title for your product. So this would be your actual title that gets shown over here. Now, there's a lot of issues that go on with this. #1 issue is that this is called keyword stuffing if you do it too often. it actually goes against Google's policies. But number two, it's extremely unprofessional. I mean, you don't really see that happening here for the top 3 listings at all, and there's no reason for you to do it just because it has all of the major keywords. I mean, sure, it has a lot of the major keywords, but there's no reason Google is going to prefer you over somebody like this who has a very simple title, very straightforward, but they're providing a much better landing page experience. Their image is much different than everybody else. Their pricing is also good. So luckily, this is something I never really fell victim to, but unfortunately nowadays people do teach that, but I highly recommend you don't do it. Instead, you watch some of my videos on my YouTube channel about how to properly create your titles. But this was something I did right from the beginning. I used to always have professional titles, which were of course search engine optimized, but that kind of covers it for the website. Now this brings me to the next point, which was the most important reason why I was able to do $2.4 million and more in sales with Google Ads. That is the back end. Trust me, in 2022 and onwards, if you don't have the right kind of back end, things are not going to flow well, period. And here's exactly what I mean. Now, for a lot of you that don't know, Google Ads is a very, very leaky bucket, meaning there's leaks everywhere in the traffic that comes from Google onto your website. And this boils down to 2 major things. Number one thing is that Google is a search-based platform. This means if somebody types in the word 3D printer, they're not only going to look at your first listing, they're most likely going to look at listing number 2, number 3, maybe number 7, maybe number 12, and they're going to just kind of browse around first before deciding on a specific 3D printer. Now, you can kind of argue that if a customer knows exactly what kind of 3D printer they want, they know the exact model number, that should not be an issue. But here's the thing. Just because you're selling that exact model number doesn't mean there's 50 other people selling that same exact model number. So then at that time, what it boils down to is the pricing, or maybe some other things like a different image that you have of that product. So with this many issues with Google, obviously you're going to have a very, very low conversion rate. And that's just the unfortunate truth of Google Ads. You will end up having lower conversion rates, and it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with you or anything you're doing incorrectly. It's just how the platform works. So because of that, what you need to be doing is you need to have a very, very strong back end. There's different ways to have a very strong back end. You can do this via email marketing, so you can have Klaviyo installed or some other email marketing platform and just capture those lost sales via abandoned cart flows, welcome flows, all of that stuff. You can also once in a while do cross-selling or just advertise other types of products to this list of emails that you have gathered from various different sources. In addition, one thing which I recently just started doing within the past year was actually having my customer service representative call those customers which abandoned their cart instead of just relying on those abandoned cart emails. This actually works wonders. You should definitely give it a try. And if you didn't even know about this, make sure to destroy the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, just for that new information you learned. But this has worked wonders for me, just having my customer service reps call those people who again abandoned their carts. A good way to recover those lost sales. But definitely during that time period, and even now, all this time period, what I was focusing on is having a very, very strong back end, because again, this led me to getting 20 to 30% of extra sales. So if we kind of open up our calculator right over here and kind of understand what 20 to 30% of 2.4 million is, you will understand how big of a number this is. So let's just say 2.4 million, and we can kind of make it even 10% instead of just saying 20%. So 10% of 2.4 million is about $240,000. So that means just from emails, SMS alone, I was able to get about $240,000 in sales, and that too at a very minimum. So as you can see, these numbers add up very, very quickly as you begin to scale. And obviously you cannot scale an e-commerce brand if you don't have all of these things in place. But ultimately, none of this matters if you don't have the right products. And that's what I understood early on within my journey with the Shopify store, because during that time period I was finding product after product, but I was not really finding any type of real success. And what I later understood was the main reason why I was not finding any kind of good success was my products were the issue. I was copying other people way too much. I was looking at other competitors' products. I was looking at other product research softwares, all of these things, which I, by the way, do not recommend at all in 2022. You don't want to be using them. But that is unfortunately what I was using during that time period, because I did not know any better. And as a result, my sales kind of suffered in the beginning. As you saw earlier, I was running at a 1.7x ROAS, which was really unprofitable. But again, I understood that products are the number one reason why you find any type of success with Google. Doesn't matter what kind of product it is. You want to keep this line in mind, and that is you want to be extraordinary within the ordinary. Now, exactly what do I mean by this? I've made a lot of profit. I've made a lot of sales selling very, very ordinary basic products like lawnmowers, air conditioners, fire pits, all of these very basic things. But because I was extraordinary within the ordinary, I was trying to find a different kind of air conditioner. I was trying to find portable ones. I was trying to find those that had different colors. I was doing all these various different things, which was the reason why I ended up being profitable, and which is the reason why I ended up getting sales at the end of the day. So again, be different from the rest of the crowd. It doesn't really matter what you sell at the end of the day. But the number one thing you want to focus on, regardless of what product you sell, what niche you're in, etc., is sourcing. Because like I told you, I had a lot of issues with sourcing, which is why I ended up refunding $500,000 in sales during this time period. But again, is this part of the business? Because I was scaling very quickly and because of what was going on during that time period, these sourcing issues were just those that I had to deal with because I had no other choice. But now in 2022 and onwards, I highly recommend you first get the sourcing right before you kind of move on to running the ads, which brings me to the final point of this video, which is actually running the ads. Now, what I learned from my journey of doing 2.4 million and above, because this is just one brand, I've worked with a lot of other brands, my own Shopify stores, which I have. There are 3 different phases which affect your Google Ads account at any given time period. It just depends on where you are within the phase and how you're doing in terms of sales and all of that good stuff. Phase number 1 is called the testing phase. This is when you're just trying to figure out what is working, what is not working. This is most likely the phase which you are in if you're just starting out with Google Ads, regardless of whether you have sales or not with the platform. This is the first phase. The second phase is called the profitability phase. This is when you already have a few winning products and now you're just trying to aim at profits. All you really care about is the profits. Number 3 phase is called the scaling phase. Now, very self-explanatory. Scaling phase is just when you're trying to scale the budgets, the bids. That's all you really care about. And this Shopify store, which I just showed you guys, went through all 3 of those phases. As you saw in the beginning, the 1.79x ROAS was the phase when I was unprofitable because I was testing. I didn't know what was working with this ad account. I didn't have any good strategy. So all I did was just spend money, of course, in a limit, not just going crazy, but I just tried different things out to see what was working, what was not working, and all of that stuff. And this kind of brought me to the next phase, which was the profitability phase. And this account really went through the profitability phase very, very quickly because again of what was happening during 2020. I mean, by the end of February, which is just a 2-month time period, I was already pretty profitable. As you can see, I had a 6.78x ROAS. So I started this store in late October, early November. So November, December, January, February. Within 4 months, I was already profitable. And then the third phase, which started after February, which is March, but we'll kind of look at August 31st, was the full-on scaling phase. As you can see, I did over $500,000 in sales at an over a 6.25x ROAS. So these 3 phases, every e-commerce brand will go through. It just kind of depends where you are right now, and you want to kind of go with the flow with these phases. So again, when testing, focus on the testing strategy and try to just test different things out and try to aim at break even. You don't necessarily need to be ultra profitable because again, this is the testing phase. Number 2 phase is when you should of course focus on profits. You might want to kind of lower down the testing phase and just fully go in on profitability. Number 3 phase, scaling. You want to kind of determine what your lowest profitability amount is. So if you're right now at a 5x ROAS and you're fine going down to a 3x because you want to scale, then you need to understand that scaling will lower your ROAS. That's just how it works. That's just what we have seen with our own e-commerce brands as well as my clients' e-commerce brands, again under my agency, Your Marketing. But these 3 phases are something you will have to just deal with. It just depends what strategy you're using and how fast you're going with the flow. Again, if you're not really sure how to go through these 3 phases, but you're already doing about $30,000 or more in sales, there has not been a better time than now to get help, especially with Google Ads, especially with scaling. So book that free call if you haven't on my website, which is yourmarketing.com. But just to kind of go over some closing thoughts now, because we have covered a lot in this video. Google Ads is a collective approach in 2022 and onwards. This means you cannot just rely on one thing anymore. You can't just rely on clicking a bunch of buttons in 2022 on your dashboard. You need to have, number one, your website right, you need to have your back end right, you need to have your products right, and ultimately you need to have your ads right, because this is going to give you that collective, well-rounded approach towards doing a lot in sales with Google Ads. But I hope you found a lot of value in this video. If you did, just do me one quick favor and smash that like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already. But I will see you in my next video.